Excellent. Accent bias, that's when a person has an opinion about a particular accent. So for instance, based on my experience on helping people, when a participant or when someone that applies for a job has a British accent, that will put that person on top of a person that has an ethical accent. So, for instance, a Latin American, a Spanish-speaking accent, or somebody that from the Middle East, or somebody from Asia. So basically, the employer has a positive opinion when a person has a British accent, but when a person has an accent from Latin America, or Asia, or Middle Eastern accent, it will put them on disadvantage.
Name bias is when some names have more privilege and power and consideration for, let's say, for like employment opportunities than other names. A good example is, when let's say Africans or even Asians come to Canada, there's always this urge that they should change their traditional names into English names. Yeah, so there's a name bias there. Linguistic discrimination, again, looks at some of the favorable languages within a society as opposed to others. And in our scenario here, I'll think more of there's a bias to Indigenous languages because, for example, we don't have them as part of our national language, even though they're the true owners of the land. There is a bias in languages that come from immigrant communities. So we find that in Canada, there is that leaning towards specifically speaking in English, doing business in English, while we could do more when we engage other languages. So name bias, linguistic discrimination, as well as accent bias are mostly faced by immigrants who come into Canada. Also, I would say an intersectionality of disability can fall in there as well, depending where these people are coming from. And of course, the Indigenous community. And this shows itself in, for example, when people apply for jobs. And we've had studies that have shown that when people don't have names like Smith, they don't have a name like David, then they're not highly likely to be considered for an interview. So, yeah. Employers could come up with a framework that necessarily does not exclude people who don't have English names, but rather, intentionally even reaching out to candidates whose names are different, just to be able to have them as part of the team. Because sometimes what I've found out with workplace discrimination, let's say accent bias, it will be because somebody has not had interaction with somebody from a different community and, chatted with them and kind of understand how their words come out. But the more people are exposed to different groups of people, different communities, different accents, it becomes easier for them to understand one another. So pushing them to the side does not work. Bringing them in and trying to adapt to make your ears understand what they're saying and making your ears be conditioned to it could be one of the ways to stop like accent bias and also name bias. Empathy guides the way and leads the way. It doesn't matter whether the leader has an MBA. If they don't have empathy, the DEI process might struggle because some of the conversations and some of the topics and some of the work that is needed around DEI, they're going to need somebody who is invested more than at surface level. they have to be invested in the heart. They have to be able to sometimes walk a mile in the shoes of the underrepresented communities for them to have that passion to drive change. So for me, empathy leads the way all the time. Of course, there's communication. Communication is key as well. If you gotta know when to say when to say what, how, where, and why. The other one is continuous learning. The whole process of DEI is to change the colonial framework to match with the current reality of inclusion that the millennials and Gen Zs have within their lifestyles. And a leader cannot be able to change that unless, they look at themselves and they ask questions. Do I know more? Is there something else I can learn? And learning doesn't just have to happen at the universities and colleges. Some learning needs to happen with, let's say, the indigenous community in their homes, with other equity deserving groups as well. Just meet and have conversations. Yeah, so those three stands out for me.